Okay, everybody. Good morning once again. I've got about 3 minutes after 9, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So a few more joining us, including our Councilman Druffel. Good morning to you, sir. I appreciate you joining us. Is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
No, I'm excited about getting Leake slowed down. I know, Tom, I see you're here, and a bunch of people over there have been part of wanting to get this done, and rightfully so. There's a lot of families on Lincoln Court, Lafayette, et cetera, that walk across there. So thanks, Jeff, and really excited that this street will slow down in the near future. I was on them. I was late for the meeting the other day for the other one, but thanks for all you do. I mean, you're getting us through all this, so thank you.
Yeah, we're trying. Thank you, and thanks for council support and all of you neighbors for getting up bright and early on a very cold morning here in Nashville and taking your time and interest to be a part of this. I want to let you know that I will be recording this meeting, and that's not to encourage good behavior. That is, so if you have neighbors and things, someone that wasn't able to be here this morning, this will be available for viewing later on NDOT's YouTube page, and I can talk later about how to access that. It'll probably be up first part of next week, available to you. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant with a group called Birch Transportation. We are a consulting engineering firm working for the Nashville Department of Transportation, or NDOT, in administration of the traffic calming program. So three things essentially that we're going to do this morning. One, give you a little bit of background on the program and how Leake Avenue got inducted into it. And secondly, we'll talk about some of the tools that we have at our disposal in trying to bring about those slower speeds. And then lastly, but probably most importantly, I want to show you a concept for what we've put together to this point and our thoughts on what traffic calming on Leake Avenue might look like, and get your reactions to that, and talk about next steps beyond that. So we'll get started. Just a little bit of background. I think that the longer we go and the more neighborhoods that have come into the program, most Nashvillians kind of see it for what it is and understand it. And but we like to give a little bit of background here. It is a residential street program. We don't try to calm commercial streets. We're not going to be out on Harding Pike anytime soon, or some of these other major arterials. We really focus on more local streets where we know that quality of life can really be affected by speeding on your street. And so this program is really born out of people requesting this. You know, every street that we go to is because someone has requested it, put in an application, said, hey, I think we have a problem here. We come out and make some measurements, take some data, and either concur with that or kind of move it lower on the list of priorities. I'll show you that in just a second. We do focus on physical solutions. We know that nothing slows traffic down as well as putting something in the street, whether that's a speed cushion or a circle. You got to drive around it, you got to drive over it, something like that. Some people see that as inconvenient. It kind of is, but that's kind of the point. That physical thing in the road really brings about slower speeds. And lastly, we do focus on speed reduction. That seems obvious, but sometimes people will say, you know, we got too much traffic on our street. Can't we push some of these cars somewhere else? And as much as you may want to do that, that's really not our focus. That's not fair to other streets. And it's very difficult to do. People will generally follow the shortest path to get where they want to go the quickest. And so we try to keep traffic where it is, just slow it down. They could drive more responsibly on your neighborhood street. We know that this is not the only way to slow traffic down, and we try to work in concert with a bigger objective, and that is some of these other E's. We call them an education aspect, whether that's a public service announcement or something like that. And we do have some tools that deal with education. I'll show you those in a second. An enforcement approach. You know, a lot of people will say, well, can't Metro just park a cruiser down here and write tickets, and that would help. And I agree, it would help, at least for the time that they're there. But we all know that MNPD is out there doing very important work and doesn't always have the resources to put to traffic enforcement. And that effectiveness kind of wanes over time. The more you see the cop is not there. One of the reasons, so we focus on the engineering part. That's our part. That's the engineering, the infrastructure, the right of way. Those are things that NDOT controls and that we're able to bring about a change with. One of the reasons we like to point to about why we do this program in the first place, aside from just being a quality of life issue and sort of an inconvenience, is it really can have real safety benefits. I don't know how much you walk on Leake Avenue. I know most of the streets, very often when someone applies for traffic calming, part of that reason is because they don't even feel safe walking down their own street, maybe even don't even feel safe walking it into your driveway to get the mail. And so we know that there are a lot of other road users besides just drivers. That seems to be coming more and more apparent. And some of the Nashville and national safety statistics are pointing toward a real problem and rising a trend towards pedestrian crashes. And so we know that if we can slow traffic down in these streets, if there is a crash between traffic and a pedestrian, that pedestrian has a much higher chance of survival walking away from that if that traffic is going at a lower speed. This is very much an in-demand program. And I say that to say you guys are not alone in this. We have, as I mentioned, it's an application-based process. In this latest cohort in which you were selected, we had over 500 applications. That's kind of a rolling backlog number. There's that much request for this program to come try and affect a change on these streets. There's a lot of people in Davidson County who are living with some of the inconvenience and some of the safety concerns that you all may have been. And so it's just a big number. To deal with that, we typically have been funded and working to do about 50 streets per year in 2 different application windows in the year. But in this past year, there was some surplus budget money, and council saw fit to allocate a portion of that to additional traffic calming projects. And so just to try in response to the overwhelming outcry for some of this work. So this year we're doing 85 streets, still, a small part of what is being requested, but that's a lot of neighborhoods to be working in. And so we're trying to, we'll talk about this, expedite that project and get some of these projects on the ground as efficiently as possible. Sometimes when we come to these meetings, people will say, well, can we have more stop signs, or certainly you'd like more sidewalks and those types of things. This program is pretty defined in terms of what we can offer, and we don't offer those types of things, but there is a way to go about requesting that. Those are very reasonable requests, and the best place to start those is Hub Nashville. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great resource for us residents of Davidson County. You go to hub.Nashville.gov. You can also pick up the phone, call 311 and talk to the operator there. This is not just transportation or NDOT requests. Just about every metro department is represented there, and so it's a great place to log those requests. You get some feedback if they get it to the right people in the department, and it's a very efficient system. So we always like to plug that. But back to how Leake Avenue got inducted into the program. This is the scoring system that we use. As I mentioned, it starts with the application request, and then we go out and we actually take data on every one of those roads that are requested. 70% of the score comes from the type of data you would probably expect it to, and that is the amount of traffic on the road and the speed that traffic is moving. And so all together, that's 70% of our priority score. The other 30% have to do with some of those other road users that we were mentioning. So if you have on the street, your actually goes down. If you have bike lanes, your score goes down a little bit. You guys have sort of sidewalks, sort of not. You've got that asphalt path, I know, along a portion of Leake. And so your score generally went up because you don't have good pedestrian accommodations compared to some of the other neighborhood streets that we work with. Your score also goes up if you have what we call here trip destinations. Are you close to a school? Are you a park? Are there things, transit service, or other types of shopping destinations and all that may warrant more additional pedestrian use? You guys have Palmer Park right there, and that really helped your score boost it up because we recognize you have a nice attraction like that, people do want to walk to it, and we want to try to make those, we try to prioritize those streets because of those types of considerations. We also boost the score if there is a documented pedestrian crash on the road as well. So we take all of that information, roll it into a score, rank those, and you guys, fortunately or unfortunately, probably unfortunately, we're towards the top of that list, and so that's how you got inducted into the program. So here's a little bit of the data specifically from Leake. The 85th percentile speed is just the engineer's way of looking at this kind of statistically and saying, is there a speeding problem or not? The way I think about this is 15% of the traffic is going higher than 34 miles an hour. So that's just a relative ranking. I mean, that's actual data here, but we look at that and compare that to every other street that we measure as well. That's kind of middle of the pack. That's not extremely high. We get some that are much higher than that, as you can imagine, but it's probably a little too fast for your street. You do have a relatively high traffic volume, almost 2,000 cars a day. Often when we tell neighbors that, they're surprised that there's that much traffic on the street, but that's not unusual for us. We will do traffic calming on streets up to 5,000 cars a day, so this is well within our limit, but it's probably slightly on the higher side of our average street. And then the street width here is 21 feet roughly. I like to get out on the street in advance of these meetings and take a few measurements so I can really be sure of that, but conditions being what they are, I just haven't been able to do that on this project. But I'm fairly certain there that we're within 21, 22 feet, something like that. Not much sure. It's just pretty typical residential streets for something here in Metro. The project that we're working on is just about half a mile long, and that becomes important. I wanted to point out here too at the top where it says Leake Avenue from Harding Pike to Westover. Probably the best place to talk about this is here. The came in, and up until yesterday, how it showed on this map was that the project went from on Leake from Harding Pike to Belmead Boulevard. That's what was requested. We can't go all the way to Belmead Boulevard because this is a Metro program, and as you all probably know, Metro's jurisdictional oversight stops at Westover. From Westover to Belmead Boulevard, that falls under the jurisdiction of the city of Belmead. So we will not be doing traffic calming on that last 2 blocks east of Westover. So while we did show it here, I think we have changed it on our mapping now because we just usually show the applications. But the project limits right now are from Harding Road to Westover. It works well because that's where the park is, and that's an always stop at Westover. It makes a good logical stopping point, but I just wanted to point that out, why that change was made. This map is helpful to us. We like showing this. This is a tool that is available to you on Metro's traffic calming website. It's an interactive map. You can pan all over Davidson County if you want to and see different traffic calming projects. A little bit about the colors here. Leake Avenue, as the project limits point out, is the green line right in the middle of the screen running east to west. It's green as any, and you see a couple other green lines. Page Road, you may see right down there on the south side of the country club property, is also green. The green lines just mean that there is a traffic calming project in the works. we're having these meetings, or we're developing the design plans, or we may just be waiting for the contractor to go out there and install something, but it's in some form of development. The purple lines or the pink lines that you see there are streets that have an application in. They have applied for traffic calming on their street. Metro is in receipt of that. We've collected the data. It just has not been prioritized to become one of the projects yet.
Jeff, yeah, your map wasn't coming up as you were talking about it. I don't know if mine was delayed or not, but FYI. The old slide was up there when you were doing, I don't know if it was just for me or not, but the slide didn't keep up with your direction. Anyhow, just
Okay.
FYI, thank you.
No, that's helpful. Thank you for pointing that out. Do you see it now?
Yeah, we got it now. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, so the purple lines are, we've got an application but no project. The green lines are, we've got an active project but it's not complete yet. And I don't know if I see any on this view right around you, but there are some blue lines on the map as well. They're usually dashed, and the blue lines indicate a project that has actually been installed. And we like for you to see that, because if there's somewhere that you want to go and drive and see how these feel, if you're not familiar with some of the speed cushions and products that we use, we like to be able to tell you where that is, so you could drive over and see those and experience them. So if you were to be able to pan around on here, you would see some streets that are blue, and that just indicates there's a project completed there. That's kind of the view of the program. I want to switch now and talk about some of the tools that we use. Starting with this one, I've referenced it a couple of times already. Speed cushions. It has become the bread and butter and almost the sole tool that we use in this program, and that's for a couple of reasons. They're a very known commodity to us. We order these from the same manufacturer for every street that we do in Metro, so we know what we're getting. These are fabricated. This is not a site-built product. It's a recycled rubber that they build to specifications, and we order those and they ship them, and our contractors bolt them down. And so that means they're very uniform. They're consistent. I can give you a street to go drive them, and it will be the exact same product that you're seeing on that street. So there's no kind of what we're going to be receiving. They hold up well. They stay looking good. We've had some of these out for probably close to 10 years now. They still look good, and they're effective. We know how to tracks with them. There's not a lot of unknown about what we're going to be dealing with. We've been using these now for a number of years, and so we're pretty comfortable with the performance of them in various aspects. Just a little bit of information about what you're looking at here. We in the speed cushions, as the name implies, they're small, kind of modular. They look sort of like pillows laying down. I guess that's why they get that name. With a gap in between, and that gap becomes important for some of our road users, our emergency responders, who usually drive larger wheelbase vehicles. So they can't straddle these, but they can get a little closer. And the fact that there's that break in between these cushions, as opposed to one big continuous piece across the road, which I'll show you that in a minute. This break is really our go-to product, unless there's some very special circumstance. This is the product we use because of the lesser impact to those emergency responders, fire trucks, ambulances, and so forth. We do use signage that goes along with these. You see that, our typical sign assembly in the upper left-hand picture. We don't necessarily have to sign every location, but there's sort of a standing policy. I'll talk more about when we get to the plan. I'm getting some feedback. If someone could mute if you're not talking.
Does that help?
I think I can mute you there. I'll try to mute you there on my end. Hopefully that helps. If you do want to make a comment, by the way, I should have mentioned that. Feel free to unmute yourself and stop me and ask away. But otherwise, I'll try to keep you muted there.
Jeff, you may be talking about this there's a big difference between speed cushions and speed bumps. And you may be getting to this, but a lot of people have bad experience with the speed bumps. It's probably good to differentiate that a little bit, because like on Lower Breslin, they went with speed bumps. Anyhow, just
Yeah,
a quick thought.
that's a great point. Yeah, this is not a speed bump. We use different terms. There's speed bumps, there's speed humps, there's speed cushions, there's speed tables. And so, yeah, let me talk a little bit more about the design. The difference in all of those is really just the dimensions of each of those, and then how that results in how you drive them and how comfortable it is, or how abrupt it is, or how aggressive it is. I guess I should say that when I think of speed bumps, I think of what's in the Home Depot parking lot. That yeah, you want to come to a stop before you go over because they're so aggressive and harsh. That's not what we're talking about here. Speed cushions, they're only about 3 inches tall. That doesn't sound like very much, but that's enough to be effective. And they come in different lengths. And by lengths, I'm saying in that bottom left-hand picture, that would be the length of the speed cushion. The shorter it is, the more abrupt and the more aggressive it is. So you think about those Home Depot or Kroger parking lot bumps. They're only about a foot wide. They're very compact, and that's what results in the very harsh, jarring motion that you get. The shortest speed cushion that's available to us is 7 feet long. Even that we reserve for our most urban neighborhoods close into downtown. We have moved now to where our default product that we use is the middle one. It's the 10.5 foot long. That is a little more comfortable and gives you, it's more comfortable, so it's less aggressive. That also results in a higher speed. Okay, so we're targeting a 20 to 25 mile an hour speed, and so the 10.5 foot cushion gives us that. We can go even longer. We can use a 14 foot. We really reserve those for more of our rural areas and outlying, where you've got really big frontage, really big setbacks off the road, and it has more of a rural nature. So it's just depending on the land use and what our target speed is that we're trying to achieve as to what we use. A very good point. The difference between 2 cushions and 3 cushions kind of gets to why there's a sign here, or why, like in the bottom, in the lower right hand picture, you see some of those little plastic sticks sticking up. We call them delineators. Really, the only consideration in using any of that is just the fact that we want to cover the width of the road. We don't want to leave room for traffic to drive through these or drive around them. So in our design process, one of our big objectives is you got to make sure that a vehicle, as it drives down the street, is going to have to put 2 wheels one side of their car on a speed cushion, or else it's not very effective. So we have some standards that we use to not put them too far apart, and also not leave too much space around the edge on the sides of the speed cushions. And we know if you leave enough room, people will actually leave the road to drive around them. If the shoulder is nice and flat, or if there's a gravel shoulder and they feel like they can get around them, they will try. We have a lot of unfortunate experience with that. So that's when we use the sign, and that's when we use the delineators and all, just to protect those edges, just to make sure someone doesn't drive around. On your street, it's narrow enough. I don't think we're going to have any problem at all, but we will be paying attention to some of those shoulder conditions, just to make sure we don't get some knucklehead who wants to drive around these things and comes into a yard in order to do that. It's not common, but we've seen it, and so we kind of learned to deal with that. Another aspect to this, I mentioned these a minute ago, is a speed table. This is the same manufacturer. We can order them. It's the same product. It's the same rubber. It goes in the same way. It's just a little bit of a different configuration. One solid piece all the way across the road. Again, it has to be a pretty unusual circumstance. The parks department is using some of these more in parks, but again, there's not nearly as much of an emergency vehicle response in those locations, and so they can kind of get away with it. We have to use these very judiciously. So we do have them in our toolbox. We can use those if conditions need. They're typically longer, so which just makes them even flatter still. We do have some before and after data. I think if you've driven across some of these, you probably recognize that they do work on average. It's not foolproof. You'll still find that you have people that are willing to still drive too fast over these, but all in all, we're seeing really good results in the order of 9 to 12 miles an hour speed reduction. But it really depends on how fast speeds were to begin with on the street and what the configuration is, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. So we're careful to make too many predictions about what your speed may be after this, but we're targeting again try to get it down just to 20, 25 miles an hour, and we're typically seeing good results in that. Another tool that we have to use sort of falls into that educational component that we talked about earlier, the radar feedback sign. Where we use these mostly, two areas, I guess. One is we don't do this traditional traffic calming if the speed limit is posted at 35 or greater. Okay, so if we do have a request for traffic calming on one of those higher speed roads, a lot of times what we use is a feedback sign, just to reinforce the idea to drivers that the speed limit is what it is, and you're going over that, and we kindly ask you to slow down. The other time we will use these is maybe in the development of a traditional traffic calming project, but there are some conditions that preclude the use of speed cushions, such as steep slopes. We're not going to put these on a steep hill, or even a sharp curve. If there's a curve you're coming around, we don't put these in curves. And then some streets have it's one driveway after the next, and we never want to block somebody's driveway with one of these. It's not dangerous. It's just kind of an inconvenience. Nobody wants to pull in and out of their driveway and have to kind of navigate a speed cushion while doing that. So we steer clear of driveways, and sometimes it's very difficult to find a place, where the density is much higher than it is in your neighborhood to situate those. In those kind of cases, we'll supplement with a feedback sign instead of speed cushions. So it helps. There's a little bit of feedback before and after data on this as well. We're finding it does have a pretty good impact, especially in the short term. I think the jury's still out about the effectiveness of these over a longer term as people get used to seeing it.
Yeah, Jeff, you just probably hit it as I was going to ask you a question, but from what I've heard from you and others, that it's only a short-term solution. So if you have one up like on Davidson, people respect it for the first 6 months to a year, and after that, people forget about it. If that's correct.
Yeah, that's kind of our theory right now. We're still collecting some data. Some of these will actually record data for us, so and collect data and see, if people seem to be abiding by it. So we're still collecting some of that. People really go both ways. Some people swear by them and say, "Oh, it absolutely helps. I can tell you it helps. I slow down every time I do it." So I assume other people do too. Other people see these and they say, "What a waste!" There's nobody pays attention to that. We hear that from where these have gone into neighborhoods. We hear two opinions on it, and so we're trying to let that data speak to it. But we can say that if we can put in a speed cushion, we would rather do it. We know it has an effect. This may or may not, and it may be a good supplement, but may not be a great total solution.
Jeff, is there an option within this scope to put in a temporary one to sort of get people's attention through the process? Is there a value to that, or is it what's your experience there?
We typically don't. There is a way to get some of that, I would say, quicker relief or it's certainly temporary. It's really not quicker, as we've learned at a recent meeting, and that is the speed trailer program. So I don't know if any of you know, but you can, through the website, request the deployment of one of those speed trailers. They pull it up, they'll put it on the side of the road, and it does very much what the radar feedback sign does. but that's all it does. That's not taking anybody's picture or anything. It's just a feedback. And so that can be deployed, but I say it's not quick because I think there's Metro has, I don't know, about half a dozen of those. I think they can put around the county at any one time, but the wait list on those is still months long. It's 4 or 6 months last time I had checked. So, but that is available. We don't typically go out and put in ground mount the sign. That's a solar powered sign. It takes a little um, time and all to do that. So we don't typically use those as a temporary measure, but yeah, more part of a permanent installation.
Jeff, can I ask a real quick question just for a side for budgeting purposes? How much are those signs? And is NDOT going to request any more of them? Because I see we only have a half a dozen. Sorry, guys, I hope to not distract this project, but if they're of some value and we only have 6 of them, just, one of our top priorities is slowing down. If you could just send me a note on maybe the cost and what you think would be of value. And when we get through the budgeting process, if we can maybe, I can talk to Diane Alcorn and see if we can't get a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah.
I appreciate your help on that. For Leake, for example, if we could have put one in during the process where we were going through this diversion for the summer, could have been pretty valuable, but we had to try to get TDOT to help. Anyhow, it was a mess, but having that would have been pretty helpful. And I know we were short on them. So anyhow, just that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to round that information up. I see a note here that my slides are still a little pokey. I'm going to turn my camera off. I don't know. Hopefully that might help a little bit. But are you seeing now a slide that says narrowing pavement markings?
Yeah, Jeff, we got it. It seemed like you were starting to talk ahead, and I wasn't sure, so I just sent you that note. But I just want to make sure, because some of this stuff is pretty interesting information when you see what it actually looks like. Thanks.
Yeah. There's a point to the slides. I'd like for you to see the pictures as I'm talking, so thank you. The narrowing tool that we have, excuse me, again, something that we use kind of judiciously, particularly if a street has pavement markings, or you can tell at one time it had pavement markings and they're just totally worn away. We will make recommendations to refresh those as part of this. We don't often introduce new pavement markings, but sometimes it's warranted. So one thing that we believe kind of lends itself towards faster driving on a neighborhood is big wide streets where there's a lot of sight distance, houses are set back far off the road, and it just feels like you can go fast because you can kind of see, and it feels wide. It feels safe to do that. Sometimes if we can use pavement markings to visually narrow the street, that might help to stripe in a little bit of a shoulder, narrow the lanes essentially. Sometimes put in a center line, although we have to be very careful with that. Like in this picture, the picture on the right, of course, a center line was added. Sometimes that communicates to people that this is a more major street and it's okay to go faster. And so we're pretty careful about changing pavement markings. But anyway, it is a tool in the toolbox that we will use occasionally. In much more urban areas, we'll use some of this, again, along the lines of trying to narrow the road or bring about some very minor driver discomfort just to make them kind of slow down and pay attention to what's going on. In some urban areas, these bulb outs on the left, it's really just artificially narrowing that street. You can see how wide it is. And then once we add the pavement markings and some of those delineators, try to narrow the throat width of the intersection and get people to slow down as they make those turns. And then the picture on the right is called a chicane. There's only 2 or 3 streets in Metro that have these and put in sometime in the past over the years. So we don't use them very often. But again, an urban application, especially if you have on-street parking, it kind of creates an artificial meandering of the street that might bring about a slower speed. I don't think either one of these are probably very fitting on your streets, but just to point them out. And then the last one here is again a tool that has its place. We're not using them very often currently in Metro, but as a traffic circle, you got to have a really big intersection for this to work. And even then, we're finding some complications with people driving the wrong way around these circles, or big vehicles like school buses have a hard time navigating. And so Metro's just not using these very much right now. So let's move into what we are looking at for your street. It's pretty basic, but it's pretty typical for what we're doing on a lot of our traffic calming projects right now, and that's a series of speed cushions. And so the reason we went through all those, I want you to be familiar when we're talking about speed cushions. This is that first one we talked about, and there's a little picture of that here on this slide. Let me define how we lay these out and how we come up with the number. You see 5 sets here. What we do is we look at the distance from one end to the next. In this case, this is a very simple project. There's not stop signs along the way or anything like that. It's pretty much a straight shot from Harding Road over to Westover. And we look at that distance. That's just a little bit under 2,500 feet. And then we'll divide that by what we want the spacing to be. And what we have found is if we can space these sets of speed cushions somewhere around 400 feet, 300 to 500 feet in an area like this, that's going to give us a really good slow progression of traffic. It's not so close together that you're going to think this is just obnoxious. We just really overdone it and may push traffic to another street, but yet it's not so far apart that someone's going to slow down to go over a set of speed cushions and then just really step on the gas to get to the next one. What we find is if we space them in this range, that traffic will slow down for the first one, and then will really just kind of stay slow because they see the next one coming, and there's no sense in speeding up just to get to it. And so we find a pretty nice slow progression of traffic from one end to the other. As I mentioned earlier, there's really no hills to speak of. There's certainly no curves here. There are several street intersections and driveways that we'll be steering clear of when we spot these, but we feel very confident that you guys have nice big frontages. There's not so many driveways that I don't think we're going to have any problem putting these in and being well clear of everyone's driveway here. So when we look at all that and lay them out, this is the spacing. We're just a shade over 400 feet as on average. I will say this: we will sometimes cheat these a little bit toward the ends of the. So if someone turns Harding, turns off of Harding onto Leake, they may encounter a speed cushion a little earlier. Although in this case, you got the commercial property right there on the corner, and then you got the Bellmead Plantation property there, which is a non-residential use. And then you got I think a creek crossing there. So anyway, we're looking at all of that, looking at those driveways and things. Overall, we've got right out of 400-foot spacing, which we're happy about. I've done nothing but talk here, and I'd like to pause on this slide for just a minute and let you all unmute yourself and let me know your reactions when you see this and you think about traffic calming on the street. Is this what you had in mind? Not what you had in mind? You like it? You don't like it? What are your thoughts? Questions you have?
Hey, this is Brian Delaney. I live at 200 Leake. I know that you mentioned stop signs are out of your jurisdiction. I was wondering how realistic it would be to apply for a stop sign in conjunction with this project, particularly at Park Hill and Leake. That's an entrance to a park, and you have a lot of young families that are trying to cross the street to get into the park. And right now, people are driving really fast. It's very dangerous just to have to cross the street to get into the park. So it seems like a really logical place to have a 4-way stop sign.
Yeah. It's hard to say how realistic that is. It's based on. I'm going to mute that. It's based on data that's collected. So there are some guidelines, some federal manual that it's used that kind of defines when always stops are a good idea. Of course, there's one there at Westover. The way you go about requesting those would be going back to the hub like we talked about earlier. And then what's going to happen if you request that is the city's going to come out and they're going to do a quick count of traffic on there, and that's the first big key is there enough traffic, especially on that side street on Park Hill, that warrants stopping Leak in order to uh, you know to have an always stop there. So they really rely on that data. Now there's other considerations too. Sight distance can be in consideration. The history of any crashes there, like you're pointing out, the use of pedestrians and the need for a safer intersection by using those. So they will look at all of that and then come up with a recommendation. Interestingly, in Metro, that ultimate recommendation or approval does not come from the city. They make a recommendation to something called the Traffic and Parking Commission. It is a board here that meets monthly, and so they actually make that call. But it starts with the city because the city NDOT will collect that data and then make that recommendation to the commission if it gets to that point. So that's how you go about that.
Thanks. Does a pedestrian crosswalk kind of fall into the same process as a stop sign?
It would, yeah, and we get that question a lot. That's one I wish we had, available to us to do as part of this project, because we know that that comes up all the time. But for now, the best way to do that is the same way. And as part of that, we will pass what we hear at these meetings on to NDOT staff. And so we kind of hit them from a couple of angles that say, you guys requested in the hub, and we're telling them, here's what we heard at our public meeting, and people have requested this, and they said, let's really look at this Park Hill intersection, and then but they will take it from there, and typically they ask us to just continue in the development of the slowing down Leak, the traffic calming project, but they'll be looking at that, somewhat in conjunction with it, if that makes sense.
And Brian, that was my question too. And I've requested a crosswalk to the park, Jeff, several times. It started getting pushed back on that, and I don't know why, because here you got busy road and you have a perfect need for a crosswalk for families going across. If you could forward that, I'm going to bring this back up to, I know there was a contact within NDOT. I just think as this is occurring, it's a perfect time to get that crosswalk done. And the coordination of that, I think from NDOT's perspective, should be pretty big, because as this is occurring, what a better place when you have a park with kids coming in, better time to create that crosswalk. So if you'll forward that, Jeff, I'm going to keep that and try to find a way to push this a little harder. Just so you know that's a busy road, but you got from Boxwood, Lincoln Court, LaSalle, and people coming over from Westover, and these are families that are coming over to that park. And so, good gosh, even across Park Hill to Leake from the other side, I've been there a bunch of times, and it's a dangerous road to cross. You got the stop sign, but people just sort of float through that stop sign a little bit too fast. I think if we had that crosswalk, it would create a much stronger visibility. So if you'll pass it on, I'll try to push this harder. And if whoever I have to go to, because it's a good time to get this thing done.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I don't disagree with that. And then what we often will tell people too, kind of in conjunction, is even if you ask for that and they say no, or you say, hey, there's other very specific issues, like maybe there's a sight distance issue pulling out of one of these side streets, or maybe you got somewhere else that I don't know, there's other crosswalk needs or whatever. Sometimes what we'll tell people is, look, while we may not can do anything specifically about that issue here, what we can do is slow down Leake Avenue, and that's going to have a positive impact on a lot of different issues that you're seeing, whether it's a pedestrian crossing or sight distance or whatever. That's not to say we're not going to continue to work on those other things specifically, but it should help. When traffic is going slower on Leake, it's kind of a different ball game, and we hope you'll see some benefit from that as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it'll divert traffic back over to Bellmead Boulevard and other places, or Harding, and they'll avoid this street after this. And all of you guys that live on it, you see it, and I walked it a bunch of times. So I think what we saw in Lower Breslin, it was our first traffic calming project, is once we started putting this stuff in, people avoided that street, which hopefully then reduces the volume. So I'm crossing my fingers that'll do it. But again, that crosswalk, and all you guys that live there, by all means, that's a huge thing. It would be helpful, because if I see a crosswalk, on a personal note, I'm going to stop. We're looking around a little bit because pedestrians are first. If we see it, we just see speed humps. It doesn't give you the same sense of importance, at least in my mind. So if there's that place, I'm going to throw my second thing out. I hope you guys don't take over questions, but and is 21 feet wide enough to put a white stripe down one side with the opposite side of the Bellmead plantation, so that you got a little bit of an asphalt walking area, but as people try to walk down Leake, because you really can't, you come out of all these neighborhoods in Lincoln Park, in LaSalle, you can't really walk on that road. Is it wide enough, Jeff, to possibly put a stripe down one side of the road to give people a little bit of space to walk down the road?
I guess there's two answers to that. 21 feet is, if it doesn't have fog, or sometimes they call them fog lines, just edge lines, certainly you can put them on a street that's 21 feet wide. Is it going to give you a place to walk? Not really. The minimum lane width that we can really get away with using, realistically, I mean, you theoretically could go less, but it's really a 10-foot wide lane width. The standard in Metro is 11 feet wide. That's a 22 feet wide. You guys don't even have that from edge of pavement to edge. But in some of these restriping, especially the more urban areas, they'll go down to a 10-foot wide lane. Even with that only gives you 6 inches, outside of that. So you can put the edge line down. There's not a problem with that, but it's not going to give you something that looks like a shoulder or any different place to.
And everybody on here that you live there, but I've walked across. I think if it's in the purview of this project, and please, everybody on, correct me if I'm wrong, adding that white line, people are going to walk along the side to get there. It may just provide, if I'm a driver and I see a sideline and people on it, I'm paying attention a little bit more. I'd like to get everybody else's thought on whether that would add any value.
I agree, that'd be very valuable.
This is Thompson Patterson. I'm at 204 Leake. I've got a couple of questions. This may be outside the purview as well. What about the restoration of the original sidewalks that were put in because of the elementary school, and they're that old? What about restoring those?
Yeah, we used to call those safety walks. They're made out of asphalt. They serve a purpose. People use them as sidewalks. They're not ADA compliant, but trying to use those and clean those up and maybe improve those a little bit. A great thing to do, but just not something that we do as part of the traffic calming program. That would fall under the sidewalk program. And I know in other places in the county, under the auspices of ADA compliance, those have been improved to look like to essentially be a regular sidewalk. The old asphalt's ripped out, it's new curb put in, and it's poured like a sidewalk. It looks like a sidewalk at that point. So that may be a possibility, but we would not be doing it as part of this. That becomes a much bigger project, but certainly something you could follow up on.
Appreciate it. Number two, the signage on Leake, and maybe this is more for councilman, but several of the speed limit signs are obstructed, by overgrowth from trees or hedges. And it's not real obvious that the speed limit really is 25 miles an hour. to Brian's point, there's a huge yellow sign westbound up the hill on Leake right before the park that says caution pedestrians crossing right at LaSalle and Park Hill, and it's obstructed by a neighbor's pine tree, and you can't even see that sign. So is there, as we go through this project, any help in getting some better signage as it relates to the speed limit, as it relates to the park?
Yeah, we sure can, and we will. I'm making a note of that. We'll look at that with the speed limit signs, and then particularly if we've got vegetation and all obstructing signs, there's a special operations crew that's what they do. They go out and clear and open up sight distance and things like that. That's certainly something that we can put on their radar and have come out there and trim that back if it's blocking existing signs, especially.
Well, there's one particularly across the street from Brian at 200 Leak that's got so much algae and growth on it, it's green. You can hardly read it. And just as a suggestion, Belmead has, reduced the height of their speed limit signs substantially. And I think they're more visible, and I think they stand out a little more. I don't know if there's a standard height of metro speed limit signs, but that would also be another idea.
Mm-hmm. Great. We'll take a look at that.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments or other thoughts?
I don't think
Well,
anybody said this, but I'll say I think the speed cushions are fantastic and is what's going to be required to reduce the speed limit on Leake. So thank you.
okay.
Likewise, this is really exciting. I think this will do a ton to make it more livable for everybody. So appreciate it.
Great. Well, that's good to hear. That's the type of information, and as well as these other things that we'll kind of roll into this and move forward. But the spacing, I just have a little caveat here. As we get out on the ground, we may have one of these spotted right where there's a manhole or something, and we got to shift it a little bit. But we'll be out on the ground making sure we're far from mailboxes and driveways and all those kind of things as we can be. But again, don't foresee any issues there. Well,
This
let me
may
talk.
have been,
Go ahead.
real quickly, I'm sorry. This may have been addressed before I jumped on the call. What is the timing for the project?
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'll move into kind of our next steps because we want to be sure you have the right expectations for this. We're here. This is probably a little overcomplicated, but we're here. It's kind of a flow chart for this process. We're here at the red circle, which is our neighborhood meeting. After today, because it sounds like we've got pretty good consensus on the plan, the concept. We'll refine that. We'll get into the design of that. All that really means is we're going to get real specific on where we're putting the speed cushions. We will actually, have some dimensions about where those will be on the street relative to. We usually reference them to driveways, so our contractor can find that easily. Those will be made available to you. We'll post those design plans on the website, so you can get into as much detail as you want to with those. At that point, and so we asked for 2 months. We don't need that long. We'll probably have this done in 3 or 4 weeks from this point, if that even. And we'll have this design work done and posted. At that point, really, we can decide this now. We need to decide if we need to come back to a second meeting. We used to do a required 2 meetings, but what we found 80% of the time was we'd come back to the second meeting and we pretty much just showed you what I just showed you, but maybe with a little more detail to it. And that, it added a bunch of time to the process that really wasn't necessary. If you all are comfortable with what you saw and what we're talking about, we don't have to come back to a second meeting. We can do that design work and then post it. You all have access to it and go straight to the online ballot process. And if you weren't aware, there is a vote that occurs just to make sure everyone that lives along Leake has had the chance to kind of weigh in on this. I'll talk more about that in just a second. And then the answer to the question about timing really comes into play after that. The ballot process is a mandatory 6-week ballot, so that's a month and a half. But the big weight comes after that. After the ballot, assuming it passes, Metro will order those materials. They just don't have room to stockpile those. There's not a big warehouse with a bunch of these sitting there ready to go. So that takes a little bit of time, but the real time then is getting on the contractor's schedule. And right now, from the time that ballot closes, we've got projects that are a year plus and have still not been installed. And I hate saying that. I wish it wasn't that long. It's just a matter of we just have a huge backlog, and the contractor just we're trying to get them to prioritize this work. They're the same. It's the same contractor that does all the striping. They do the striping for TDOT and NDOT. And they just have a lot going on. And so anyway, I say all that to say I don't want you thinking by Easter the speed cushions will be out there. It's going to be a little while. So we're looking at a year plus even from this point. But the one thing we can control is, do you want to come back to a second meeting or not? I'm happy to do it, but if I don't waste your time if there's not going to be additional information to share with you. Sorry, I just cut someone off.
No second meeting.
Second that.
And by the way, Tom, if it takes a year from the time this is approved, we need to get some different contractors. That's an unacceptable wait for this kind of work.
Tom, I was about ready to say, and this goes back to Jeff, it's not you, but if there is any way through the budget process to expedite or add a contractor, I got to say that I'm on budget finance for 4 years. We would jump and support that in big time. Almost every council person's district constituents are looking for this as one of the priorities. So if you'll take back to Diane, I'll probably see her too. But Diane Alcorn, this is big. If we can't do this, the summer is a special problem because you got Belmead Plantation here that adds tremendous traffic volume. So having to wait that long is not necessarily your fault, but boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of support from Metro Council to expedite this in any way. Everybody that I know is what's it take to get more done.
Yeah.
So anyhow, when we met with NDOT last year in that, when the presentation came from NDOT, almost everybody weighed in to say, including myself, that said, "Hey, we'll prove more money, just get it done." So there is a lot of support for that. I know, execute, but if you'll carry that back up to Dan Alcorn, and I will make sure, if I have to in any way, get more money for you guys to expedite, whether getting a new one out there or not, new purveyor.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Tom, totally agree. This is we need, it's great that we're getting on target and on track, but boy, having to wait and go through a summer with you guys having to live through this is frustrating. So I'll work on that side.
Yeah, and it's something that the department is very aware of. They are working to try and fix it. As you know, Councilman, I mean the contracting, the procurement process is just it's a big thing to untangle. There's a lot of obstacles to doing that and getting people under contract. But then the other part of it too is, construction continues to be, booming in Nashville, and finding contractors that are willing to come out and do this work at a reasonable price, and they're all fighting for the same people and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of obstacles to it, but they are working diligently to try and get more contractors, better contractors, people that do want to prioritize this and give good service to Metro. So anyway, it's something that's very well known, but I totally support. Reach out and push all you can. They are very aware.
I know Mayor O'Connell is interested. I meet with him on Friday. I'll definitely add this to my list of things that I think are important. So thank you. And I know you're doing everything you can because you're at, I mean, I'm on calls with you at 7 o'clock at night and on Saturdays and Sundays. So I know it from NDOT's perspective, what you guys are trying to do is there. You just need the support to get it done.
Yeah.
Second question, and this is for you guys that live on Leake that come out of the south. The placement of these cushions is at a regular pace. Is there some value to put them as you come out of LaSalle, Lafayette, and on all your roads to Boxwood is there a value to putting them at that place? So when they come up, people have to slow down at your exit out of your road. Just a thought, didn't know for you that are there, or is this going to slow enough down it wouldn't really matter? It's just an idea. Because then, if people try to speed up and they're coming out of Lincoln Court right there in between, is that a burden? So as we're thinking of putting these down, is there a value of maybe spacing them at a different place? That was a question just for you guys living in a Leake. That's all I have. Thanks.
Not for me.
This is Rick Miller. I think probably one of the most important things is having one as near to Harding Pike as possible, just because I live on Boxcroft, and I can assure you that by the time some cars get to Boxcroft, they're already doing 50 miles an hour. So stop them early. I'm looking at the layout right now that's on the overhead that you sent us, and those spacings look pretty good, and where they are, and in general. So to me, they do. But
Okay, thanks, Rick. I want to, as we're solidifying this and maybe not have a second meeting, just want to make sure we pursued every angle. Thanks.
Sounds good. Well, I want to talk just a minute about this, because if we did have a second meeting, this used to be a lot of what we talked about in that, so we want to cover it now. So once those design plans are posted, about the same time, we'll be mailing out these cards, and it'll be much like the card if you got one for this meeting. I'll show you in a minute who we'll be sending this to. But if you're an eligible voter, we're going to send you one of these cards, and it's got some websites and QR codes to get you to websites. It's got a phone number. If someone gets a card and they're not comfortable doing this on the internet, they can pick up the phone and call someone and vote that way. And all it really asks you is your name and your address, and or do you support the project or not. It does also link to those design plans, so you can see all of that, and you just vote yes or no. And at the end of that 6-week period, we look at all of the responses. If you don't vote, you just don't count either way. We just look at the responses, the people that do vote. And if 66% of those, 2/3 of those vote yes, they're supportive of the project, then we'll move it forward at that point. If not, they won't. The people that are eligible to vote, I guess this is everybody. This is a pretty small ballot, because this segment is, again, y'all got a lot of frontage, so there's not a whole bunch of houses in this. The policy is that we send these ballots to the owners of the property, who have a parcel that abuts the right of way of the street that we are traffic calming. So we know that there are people on, especially here, like Lafayette, LaSalle, Lafayette, Lincoln, Boxcroft. All of you people use Leake every day, and as much as the people who actually live on Leake Avenue do. However, you may or may not see the speeding situation that the people who live on Leake deal with, and so that's the major reason why the policy is that we only ballot the people who have property abutting the right of way of Leake. So this picture here on the left is just a screenshot from the tool that we use, and you see, the people in yellow, the parcels that we would be balloting. The I guess they're condominiums there, right there on the creek, next to Boxcroft. Those are individual owners, and so we would be balloting each of those people individually, with the idea being that they own in common the property that does abut Leake Avenue. So we do ballot condo owners. Everything else is pretty straightforward. You got the plantation, which is a little bit of an unusual, we don't have one of those on every project, a historical house museum. So we will probably contact them just to, get their opinion, whether we formally send them a ballot or not. I don't know. We may, and just let them vote like everybody else if they desire to do that. Typically, we do that for schools and churches. We let those people vote. We do not let businesses vote, and it looks like even in this picture, I've got the commercial property there at the corner of Harding and Leake. We will not be sending one to them. We don't ballot business properties, and anyway, they'll be largely unaffected by the project because our first speed cushion wouldn't be until after you get past their property and their driveways and all. So that's who gets to vote. Let's see, if anybody owns more than one piece of property here, they would just get one ballot. And you can only vote once. And then if any of these are vacant, I don't think they are, but we don't ballot vacant properties either. Any
Pardon me,
questions about that?
Jeffrey.
Yes, sir.
What's the clarification on the Boxcroft people again?
So the only people on Boxcroft that would get to vote are the people that live there on the corner, whose property abuts Leake Avenue.
Okay,
Nobody else.
Jeffrey, I think that should be modified because Boxcroft is not a through street. There's no other way out. So everybody on there essentially comes out Leake Avenue just like I do at our house. So I think that needs a modification.
I certainly understand that, but we have the same situation on Lincoln Court, Lafayette Court, LaSalle Court. All of those people are in your same situation in that they have no choice but to use Leake. They only come out on the Leake. They're essentially a dead end. And so that's why the policy was written the way it is. Get some feedback here.
It does seem odd to me that the condo owners are, they're just as far back as anybody on Boxcroft or the courts, yet they all have a vote. I mean, given their size, the condo will 100% control the vote, given the number of units compared to the other voters that are on the screen.
I'm not sure how many are in. I mean, I can pull this up and I can tell you, but yeah, I'll have to look. I don't remember how many owners are actually in the condos, but I'll check that before we get off the phone if you're interested. But yeah, the point behind that policy, going back to dead end streets, we totally hear you. It makes all the sense in the world that people who rely on Leake Avenue should get to have a say in that. However, even in this case, and in many streets in Metro, the street that we're looking to traffic calm is dominated by people who might live in a cul-de-sac or many cul-de-sacs off of it. And so often what we find, I don't think this is the case with you folks in Boxwood or any of these side streets necessarily, but in many streets in Metro, those are probably the people that are contributing largely to the speeding, and yet they don't have the impact of it. And so if we open that up to everybody who's relying on the street or having to guess who is reliant on the street, sometimes it's not as obvious as it is here in Foxcroft, then we have a huge vote, and it's dominated by people who don't see the speeding the way the people that live on the street do. So that's the point behind it. I hear you. I know it's an imperfect way. There's pros and cons both ways, but this is kind of the policy that's been vetted through Metro Legal and NDOT and everybody, and it seems to be working well. So that's the reason. Any other questions about the ballot? I'm gonna pull that mailing list up right now and see how many we actually have.
This is Rick. I assume that the 66% approval rating would be off of those ballots which are actually sent back, not the total number of ballots that are sent out. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's no number or threshold number that we're looking to receive back. If 10 people vote, then we'll go with 7 out of 10. But typically, we're seeing response rates of 20 to 30% on most neighborhoods. It's reasonable. It's kind of like we probably have a better voting rate than most national elections. People think traffic calming is more important than the president. I don't know, but NDOT also does make these. If you're interested, make these results available. You can see, which neighborhoods passed, which failed, how many, and so forth. I will say the overwhelming majority, once they get to this point, do pass. There are a few that fail, but can't say for sure how that would go. But odds are it would pass. I did just look. There are 91 potential voters in that, and so whoever made the comment about the condos is right. There are a lot of those folks, more on it than I remembered, and so that I think they do have a large stake there, but whether or not they will vote remains to be seen.
Proportional, Jeff, I see this as, I don't know if it's really going to make a difference down the road, because I think everybody feels pretty positive about it, but you really do have the LaSalle Lincoln Court people who are in the same boat, without sort of a voice. How hard is it just to extend that to them? I think most of them feel pretty positive about this. You got several people on here that live in that area, but I do think there's a value to, it can't cost too much more just to extend that. Is there a policy issue, or is it, what would it prevent us from probably doing that?
You're saying to extend the vote to the side streets or something?
The Lincoln Court in LaSalle. Yeah, there's 2 side streets, I think, if I'm not missing anybody, that probably are the ones that have, and Rick, he represents Boxcraft really well. I think, the people on the street, are friends and neighbors of people on Leake, but by all means, having the opportunity to vote and say is probably a value. Maybe it was at 30 or 40 houses, something like that. Is there a reason we wouldn't just extend the votes? Because again, it's everybody that is on LaSalle Lincoln. It's a U street, right? There's only one way to come out, and that's on Leake. And I know Tom and all you guys are on Leake, so you probably represent these guys well, but I do think whether it changes the thing, just knowing that they have the opportunity to vote is important.
Yeah, I mean, from a feasibility, it's easy. I don't care if I send 10 postcards out or 110. It doesn't make any difference to us in terms of the mechanics of just doing it. That's easy. It's more of the policy, and the reason that policy is there just to keep a lot of guesswork from who should get to vote and who shouldn't. It's kind of set. It's consistent. It doesn't set up some sort of an ongoing requirement that now we got to start allowing everybody who's got access to the road, even if it is sole access, required access to the road.
Sure.
So, but that's just a decision Metro makes. So if there's a prevailing sentiment, and I would just caution you. You don't, if you guys have a real good sense for how people would want to vote and all of that, but that's totally up to y'all. And I'm not saying that they will do that, but if you want to make that request that this voting block be extended and here's why and all that, feel free to send us. I'm gonna give you my email and
Sure.
Metro's into that program. We're happy to do it either way. I can just tell you that's why that policy is in place, and
Sure.
they try to kind of hold to it just to avoid precedents for every other neighborhood.
Jeffrey and Tom, I'd just like to say, I think it'll pass with 2/3 the way it is. I would expect it would pass the other way, but I think the reward for all of us is to get this done I'd rather stay with the smaller voting block that I feel confident about, because the towers, I think they'll vote for it. But of the other 20 people, I'm confident 18 or 19 will vote for it. So I feel like we can accomplish what we want without doing that. Respectfully submitted.
No, Tom, that's, I don't delay anything. I just want to make sure, Rick, I know you with Boxcroft, you have a good pulse of what's going on in there. And I sense everybody on Leake is very positive about it. I just want to make sure, there's that opportunity. I don't want to slow this thing down. I just want to make sure, if for some crazy reason we don't get the 66%, we have the opportunity to do something. So I'm good with that.
This is Rick. I think just to get this done wouldn't upset me at all if we don't have a vote.
Okay.
Getting it done is absolutely the most important part.
Good. Then we'll just skip any consideration for expanding.
I will
Yeah, I
say,
guess one comment on that. I guess I'm not as keyed in on the sentiment of the people that live in the towers. Do we feel that they would be supportive of this because they more or less control the vote, given their outsized number?
Yeah. And that goes back to you, Rick. You got a pulse of what's going on there. Brian, just as an outside worst case scenario, Jeff, worst case scenario, if for some reason we don't get the 66% vote, what's that look like? I don't think that's going to happen, but I just want to make sure, since we're all on one call right now, I just want to make sure we have a backup and understanding.
Sure. So typically what happens if it does not pass is that we don't walk away from the project, but we do kind of downscale it. We assume in that what people are saying is they're not opposed to traffic calming necessarily. They're opposed to driving over speed cushions. And so what we would do is go back in and retool the project and take out those. We would take out the speed cushions, and you'd be left with something like the radar feedback signs or something like that. It would just be a less, I don't know, less aggressive, less intrusive type of a project. And honestly, probably not as effective, but that's how we kind of deal with people's opposition to it. We just assume that that's not something the street is interested in, and so we retool it to something a little more basic.
Hey, Jeff, can we just say that if for some reason the 66% criteria isn't met for some outside reason, we have a second community meeting to maybe expand the discussion. This is just a backup
Sure.
plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way to do it.
That way, before we go to changing any ideas on scope, I think, again, I don't like to always look at worst case scenarios, but I like to, while everybody's on the call, just know we have a backup plan. I think, Tom, all you guys have probably hit right on. Brian, it's likely this is going to vote, but I just don't want to take a chance.
Hey, this is Thompson Patterson again. I'm really speaking to Rick Miller and Tom McNeil. I mean, between the three of us, I mean, my family is in Bellmead Towers. Everybody we kind of know, a lot of people in Bellmead Towers. I mean, if the three of us jawbone the folks over there, don't you guys think that we could get some positive outcome from the towers?
I'm certainly willing to help try to get that. I really wonder how many of those 91 people would ever respond personally, but
Yeah, I don't think they'll respond at all, or maybe 10 of them, out of the 90.
Yeah.
But the ones that we do know over there, and my kid's aunt and uncle over there, and everybody else, I think we could at least get them to vote positively, and
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. We'll move forward, but we have at least I want to make sure we have a backup plan with the second community meet, worst case scenario. So because we all know we want to move this as fast as possible. Thanks.
That sounds good. And just so you know, there's feedback. We did send these cards out for this meeting. There we go. To folks as well. So we sent out 91 cards, and you see the number of people we got on the call. That's not unusual. So I think your point about will they respond or not, any one given group of potential voters, good question. And you know, I think you're kind of hitting on what we see on most of these votes is that 20 to 30% is who's concerned and question, you know, and interested in the outcome of this. And I think that's probably why far and away most of them pass. But, all right, let me. So there's contact information. I'm Jeff Hammond. I'm the one in green below. The email address on the top there, NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. I know that's a generic one, but the reason is because multiple staff members tap into that and see those. So if you got questions or concerns or want to pass along any other information to us in the meantime, feel free to do that. Email me or NDOT or both of us, and we'll do our best to be responsive to that. And then the last thing here, just the website information. Some of the maps and the plans and things I shared with you earlier are all available here. TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. You can also use your phone and use that little code there. And that'll take you to their webpage, which really does have a wealth of resources about the program and different aspects of it. So feel free to use that or Google that and find it. Put that back up here. Again, we really appreciate everyone coming out on a snowy Saturday morning. Thank you, Rick, kind of spearheading organizing that with us, and Councilman, and all of you for taking your time and energy and interest in this. Any final questions before we sign off for the day?
Rick, one last time, I just want to thank Jeff and Tom very much for all you all are doing. It's most appreciated, and I think we'll get to the finish line with this.
That sounds good. Well, if you have anything comes up in the meantime, feel free to reach out. And with that, we will say thanks again for joining us, and have a good rest of your Saturday. Be safe out in the snow.
Everybody, bye now.